I'm Madison, 32, and I built a successful HVAC business from the ground up after our parents died. I practically raised my little sister Rachel, putting her through an expensive college I never got to attend myself. Last Thanksgiving, she invited me to dinner with her wealthy new friends, only to humiliate me for being just an AC tech and ask me to leave. My response? I cut off her entire college fund. Let me tell you, sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that teach the most important lessons. Before I dive into this heartbreaking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family. Growing up in our middle-class neighborhood in Grand Rapids, Michigan, my sister Rachel and I had a pretty normal childhood. Dad ran a small but respected HVAC repair business, and Mum worked as a school administrator. We weren't rich by any means, but we never went without the necessities. Rachel was 6 years younger than me, and from the moment my parents brought her home, I adored her. She was this tiny bundle with curious eyes that followed me everywhere, and as she grew, she became my shadow. I taught her to ride a bike, helped with her homework, and defended her from playground bullies. Our lives changed forever on a rainy Tuesday night during my senior year of high school. I was 18, excited about college acceptance letters, and planning my future in business management. Rachel was just 12. The police officer at our door delivered the news that would reshape our entire lives. My parents had been killed in a multi-car pile-up on the interstate during a sudden storm. The following weeks passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, legal meetings, and overwhelming grief. My Aunt Susan wanted us to move in with her family in Florida, but that would have meant uprooting Rachel from the only home she'd ever known, while she was already dealing with unimaginable loss. I couldn't let that happen. Instead, I made the decision that would define the next decade of my life. I deferred my college acceptance, took over Dad's struggling HVAC business, and became Rachel's legal guardian with support from our grandparents who lived nearby. Learning the trade wasn't easy. Dad had always tried to teach me basics during summer breaks, but now I had to become proficient quickly. I spent nights studying HVAC manuals and days shadowing Dad's former employees who patiently taught me everything. They knew. Many clients stayed loyal out of respect for my father, giving me a chance to prove myself despite my age and inexperience. Those first 2 years were brutal. I'd wake up at dawn to make Rachel breakfast and get her off to school, work 10-hour days trying to keep the business afloat, then come home exhausted to help with homework and try to be both sister and parent to a grieving teenager. Some nights, after Rachel went to bed, I'd sit at our kitchen table surrounded by bills and permit applications, wondering if I'd made the right choice. But slowly, things improved. I earned my certifications and developed a reputation for honest work and fair prices. By the time Rachel started high school, I had expanded the business from 2 vans to 5 and hired additional technicians. We moved from barely surviving to comfortably stable. Through all the struggles, Rachel thrived academically. She maintained perfect grades, joined debate team and student government, and developed a passion for business law. I made sure she never felt the financial strain I was under, prioritizing her school activities and needs above everything else. When Rachel was a junior, her guidance counselor suggested she apply to prestigious universities. I still remember her excitement. When she showed me brochures for schools I could never have dreamed of attending. That night, I made her a promise I intended to keep no matter what. I would pay for her education in full. She wouldn't start adult life burdened by student loans like so many of her peers. The day Rachel's acceptance letter from Cornell arrived was one of my proudest moments. She literally jumped into my arms, both of us crying happy tears. All the sacrifices seemed worth it for that single moment. I worked harder than ever that summer before she left, taking extra emergency calls and expanding service hours to build up her college fund. Rachel spent her last hometown summer working in our office, learning the business operations and helping me streamline our scheduling system. The changes started subtly during her freshman year. Our daily calls became weekly, then occasional. Her visits home during breaks grew shorter. She spoke excitedly about classes and professors, but mentioned her new friends only vaguely. I told myself this was normal. She was growing up, finding her independence exactly as she should. What mattered to me was that she was getting the chances I never had. Every tuition payment, though substantial, felt like an investment in her future. Every care package I sent was packed with love and reminders of home. Even when she called less, I kept my promise to myself. Rachel would have every opportunity to become whatever she dreamed of being. The real changes began during Rachel's sophomore year, when she joined one of the most exclusive sororities on campus. Her new Instagram posts showed her with a group of perfectly polished young women from backgrounds vastly different from ours, daughters of executives, politicians, and old money families. During winter break that year, Rachel came home for just 3 days before heading to Aspen with her roommate's family. When she did arrive, I barely recognised her. Gone was her natural look and Michigan accent, replaced by expensive highlights, designer clothes I knew she couldn't afford on the allowance I sent, and a strange new way of speaking that sounded like a character from a reality TV show about rich people. "Madison, you absolutely must try this amazing moisturiser," she said, within minutes of arriving, pronouncing my name differently than she ever had before. "It simply transformed my skin. My friend Bianca's mother has it shipped from Paris." I laughed it off then, but looking back, I should have recognised the warning signs. Rachel was reinventing herself, and her reinvention didn't include any traces of her actual background. The first time I directly noticed her embarrassment about our family was during a video call when one of her sorority sisters walked into her dorm room. Rachel quickly angled the screen away and introduced me as Madison, a family friend, rather than her sister. Later, she explained she was just flustered by the interruption, but the damage was done. I felt a sting that would become all too familiar. Over the next year, patterns emerged that I couldn't ignore. Rachel began declining my offers to visit campus, always with plausible excuses: midterms, sorority events, study groups. When I suggested driving up for a weekend, mentioning I could look at the dormitory's problematic heating system the students had been complaining about on social media, her response was immediate. "God, no, Madison. I mean, that's really not necessary. The school has maintenance staff for that." Her hometown visits dwindled to major holidays only, and even then she spent much of her time on her phone, texting friends and making plans for her return to school. She began referring to Grand Rapids as where I grew up, rather than home. Most tellingly, she stopped accepting the care packages I lovingly prepared with her favourite homemade cookies and practical items. "Could you just transfer the money instead?" she asked. "Shipping is such a waste, and there's this incredible boutique near campus where Bianca and I love to shop." Each of these changes hurt, but I kept telling myself it was just a phase. She was exploring a new world, trying on new identities. She'd remember her roots eventually. Meanwhile, I continued building the business, now with 10 employees and a solid reputation throughout Western Michigan. I took out a small business loan to purchase a commercial property for our headquarters instead of continuing to rent. My life was full with work, employees who depended on me, and community involvement. If Rachel was pulling away, I still had plenty to be proud of. During her junior year, Rachel landed a prestigious summer internship at a corporate law firm in Chicago. She called me, genuinely excited for the first time in months. "Madison, this is it. This is exactly the foot in the door I need. The partners are all Harvard and Yale law graduates, and the connections are incredible." I shared her excitement, and immediately offered to help with housing costs in Chicago for the summer, knowing internships like these were often unpaid or minimally compensated. What I didn't realize then was that Rachel had secured the position through her roommate's father, not through her own merits as she'd implied. That fall, Rachel moved off campus into a luxury apartment with 3 sorority sisters from similarly affluent backgrounds. The rent alone was more than my mortgage, but when she explained it was necessary for networking and would look better on graduate school applications, I reluctantly increased her monthly allowance. "Everyone lives in this building," she explained during a rare phone call. "All the right people. It's where connections happen." I stretched my finances thin to accommodate her necessary expenses. New laptop for school? Approved without question. Designer interview suit? Of course she needed to look professional. Spring break trip to Cancun because everyone in her study group was going, and they'd be discussing the material. I transferred the money despite my doubts. All the while, Rachel shared less and less about her actual life. Our conversations became superficial updates and financial requests. The sister who once told me everything now seemed like a polished stranger. Still, I held on to hope that this was temporary, that education and exposure to different people would ultimately broaden her horizons, not narrow her values. What I didn't realise was how completely Rachel had begun to believe in her new persona. In her mind, she was no longer the daughter of an HVAC technician and a school administrator from Michigan. She had reconstructed herself as someone who naturally belonged in the world of privilege she'd entered. And in this new narrative, I was becoming an inconvenient reminder of a past she wanted to forget. The invitation came unexpectedly in early November. Rachel called on a Sunday afternoon while I was catching up on paperwork. "Madison, I've been thinking. You should come to my place for Thanksgiving this year," she said, her voice carrying a forced casualness. "My roommates will be there with their boyfriends and we're doing this whole gourmet dinner thing. It'll be fun." I nearly dropped my phone in surprise. After months of polite deflections and minimal contact, this sudden inclusion caught me off guard. But my joy quickly overcame my suspicion. "I'd love that, Rachel. Are you sure, though? I know how busy you are with finals coming up." "Absolutely. It's time you saw how I live now," she replied with a laugh that sounded slightly rehearsed. "But it's going to be pretty sophisticated, so maybe wear something nice?" That comment gave me pause, but I brushed it aside. Of course, a holiday dinner with law students would be dressier than our usual family Thanksgivings in sweatpants. I spent the next 3 weeks looking forward to reconnecting with my sister and getting a glimpse of her new life. I shopped carefully for the perfect outfit, eventually selecting a navy blue dress that the boutique owner assured me was both elegant and appropriate for a holiday dinner. I spent more than I should have on a case of wine recommended by the local wine shop as impressive without being pretentious, and woke up early Thanksgiving morning to bake Mum's traditional apple pie from scratch. The drive to Rachel's city took nearly 4 hours. I sang along to the radio, practiced conversations in my head, and fantasized about Rachel proudly introducing me to her friends. Maybe I had misjudged the situation. Perhaps this invitation was her way of bringing our worlds back together. Rachel's apartment building looked like something from a magazine, all gleaming glass and stone with a uniformed doorman and valet parking. I felt immediately out of place as I pulled up in my work truck, which I'd driven because my personal car was in the shop. The valet's expression when I handed him my keys spoke volumes. "It's very clean," I assured him, noticing his hesitation. "I use it for business management, not actual service calls." This was a lie, but his disdainful glance at the HVSE company logo on the door had triggered an unexpected shame. The security desk called up to Rachel's apartment, and after a brief conversation, directed me to the elevator with a skeptical once-over. I clutched my purse, the wine, and my carefully boxed pie, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. Rachel opened the door with a flute of champagne already in hand. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup flawless, and her outfit probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly as she took in my appearance. "Madison, you made it," she said, giving me an air kiss rather than our usual hug. "That dress is colourful." Before I could respond, she glanced at my offerings. "Oh, you brought wine. We're actually serving a specific vintage that pairs with our menu, but thanks. And you baked. How traditional. The kitchen's through there." She gestured vaguely toward the back of the apartment before steering me into a living room where 5 expensively dressed 20-somethings lounged with the casual confidence of people who've never questioned their place in the world. "Everyone, this is Madison," Rachel announced without mentioning our relationship. "Madison, this is Bianca and Taylor, my roommates and their boyfriends, Preston and William. And this is Cordelia, our other roommate." The introductions continued with brief mentions of family connections and impressive credentials. Bianca's father owned a banking group. William was already being courted by top law firms. Preston's family had a vacation home in the same Italian village as some European royal family. I tried to participate in their conversations about graduate program rankings and skiing conditions in Gstad, but every contribution I made was met with polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. When I mentioned a recent article I'd read about corporate law trends, hoping to connect with Rachel's interests, William corrected my understanding in a tone one might use with a slightly slow child. The apartment suddenly felt uncomfortably warm, and I noticed Cordelia fanning herself. "Is it hot in here, or is it just me?" she asked, directing the question to no one in particular. "The heating's been acting up all week," Bianca complained. "Maintenance said they can't send anyone." Until Monday because of the holiday. Before I could stop myself, my professional instincts kicked in. I could take a look at it. Heating systems are my specialty. Rachel's eyes widened in alarm, but Cordelia jumped at the offer. "God, could you? It's absolutely roasting in here." 15 minutes later, I had located the problem, a faulty zone valve, and implemented a temporary fix that would hold until proper repairs could be made. I returned to the living room feeling a moment of pride. This was something concrete I could contribute. Rachel pulled me aside as the others resumed their conversation. "Did you have to do that?" she hissed. "Now they'll think—" "Think what?" I asked, genuinely confused. She shook her head. "Never mind. Let's just get through dinner." As I washed the mechanical grease from my hands in their designer bathroom, I caught sight of my reflection and suddenly understood. In this carefully curated world Rachel had constructed, I was the element that didn't belong, the piece that revealed the artifice of her new identity. Dinner began with Bianca opening a bottle of wine that apparently needed to breathe for precisely 37 minutes, according to William, who described himself as something of a wine connoisseur. When Rachel handed me a glass, he asked what I thought of the bouquet and mouthfeel. "It's good," I said simply after taking a sip, not knowing what else to add. This earned barely concealed smirks around the table. "Madison owns her own business," Rachel interjected quickly, clearly trying to elevate my status in the group. "Oh, really? What industry?" Taylor asked, seeming genuinely interested. I straightened up, ready to share something I was actually proud of. "I run an HVAC company, heating, ventilation and air conditioning. I took over after my father passed away and expanded it from 2 trucks to a full commercial operation with 15 employees. We service residential and commercial properties throughout Western Michigan." "So you fix air conditioners?" Preston clarified, exchanging glances with William. "Among other things," I responded, trying to maintain my dignity. "We handle complete climate control systems, including design and installation for new construction. We've actually contracted with several sustainable building projects recently, incorporating geothermal systems that—" "Madison didn't go to college," Rachel interrupted, her voice tight. "She's just naturally good with mechanical things." The table fell silent for a moment before William cleared his throat. "Nothing wrong with the trades. Someone's got to keep their hands dirty so the rest of us can keep ours clean, right?" He laughed at his own joke, and several others joined in. "Blue-collar work is having quite the moment," Bianca added, as if discussing a fashion trend. "My father always says the skilled trades are the backbone of the economy, though of course he made sure all of us got proper educations." I felt my face grow hot, but maintained my composure. Actually, running a successful business requires significant knowledge of finance, management, marketing, and employment law. I've essentially given myself a business education while building a company that provides good jobs with benefits to 15 people. Rachel's fork clattered against her plate. "She's just an AC tech who never went to college," she said sharply. "Can we please talk about something else?" The table fell completely silent. Even Rachel's friends seemed shocked by her bluntness. I stared at my sister, waiting for her to soften the blow or indicate she was joking. She didn't. Instead, she avoided my eyes and took a long sip of wine. "Maybe Madison would be more comfortable eating in the kitchen," Rachel suggested after an excruciating silence. "Since she already fixed things in there earlier, we wouldn't want to bore her with all our law school talk." "Rachel," Cordelia murmured, seeming uncomfortable with the direction things had taken. "What?" Rachel snapped. "We clearly don't have anything in common anymore. We're in completely different social circles now. I thought this could work, but it's just making everyone uncomfortable. I set my napkin beside my barely touched plate and stood up slowly. 20 years of memories flashed through my mind, reading bedtime stories to Rachel after our parents died, working double shifts to pay for her braces, driving through a blizzard, to see her debate competition, opening every acceptance letter together, and sending her to college with everything she could possibly need. "I'll go," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. "Thank you all for your hospitality." Rachel followed me to the door as I collected my coat and purse. I left the pie untouched on the kitchen counter. "Madison, you just don't fit in with my life anymore," she said, her voice low. "I've worked really hard to build these connections. They're my future." "And what am I?" I asked. She sighed impatiently. "You're my past. I'm grateful for everything you did, really. But I need to move forward with people who understand the world I'm entering. I paid for that world," I reminded her. "And I appreciate that, but money can't buy understanding or class, can it?" She opened the door, clearly eager for me to leave before her friends could overhear. "I'll call you next week, okay? Let's just forget this happened." I walked to the elevator in a daze, my mind struggling to process what had just occurred. The sister I had raised, supported and loved unconditionally, had just dismissed me as an embarrassment, a relic of a background she wanted to erase. The drive home was a blur of highway lights and painful memories. I kept replaying every sacrifice, every proud moment, every time I'd put Rachel's needs before my own. The dashboard clock read 9:30 p.m. when I pulled into my driveway. Thanksgiving. Dinner ended before it had really begun. I sat in my truck for a long time, staring at the dark windows of my empty house. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine what my life might have been if I'd chosen differently, if I'd accepted the scholarship I'd received, gone to college, pursued my own dreams instead of enabling Rachel to chase hers. Eventually, the cold forced me inside, where I heated a frozen dinner and ate it standing at my kitchen counter. My phone remained silent. No apology, no explanation, not even a message to make sure I'd arrived home safely. That night, I cried myself to sleep for the first time since my parents' funeral, not just for the humiliation I had endured, but for the sister I had clearly lost long before this Thanksgiving. I spent the entire weekend alone, alternating between grief, anger, and a deep sense of betrayal. By Sunday evening, my emotions had crystallized into something more resolute: determination. I dug through the attic, finding boxes of family photos and memorabilia I'd carefully preserved after our parents died. Among them was a letter my father had written to Rachel on her 10th birthday, full of pride and gentle wisdom about the importance of character and treating others with kindness. Another box contained cards Rachel had made for me throughout the years, handmade thank you notes for helping with school projects, for attending every soccer game, for being the best sister ever. These tangible reminders of our real relationship, not the distorted version Rachel now preferred to acknowledge, strengthened my resolve. I hadn't just been her financial support, I'd been her rock, her advocate, her family. And somewhere along the way, I'd enabled her transformation into someone who saw those contributions as embarrassing rather than loving. Monday morning, I arrived at my office early and called my financial advisor before I could second-guess myself. "Daniel, I need to make some changes to the college fund I set up for my sister," I began after exchanging pleasantries. "Of course. Madison, what did you have in mind? An increase in the monthly deposits?" he asked. "Actually, the opposite. I want to stop all payments immediately." There was a pause on the line. "I see. May I ask what prompted this decision?" "Rachel Still has 3 semesters of undergraduate studies remaining, plus law school if that's still her plan." I explained the situation as objectively as I could, though my voice wavered at times. Daniel, who had worked with me since I took over the business, listened without judgment. "Financially speaking, this would certainly ease the burden on your cash flow," he noted. You've been allocating nearly 30% of your personal income to her education and expenses. The figure, stated so plainly, stunned me. I knew it was substantial, but hearing the percentage quantified made me realise how much I'd been sacrificing. I'd like to set up a separate, smaller fund, I continued. Something that would cover basic living expenses and partial tuition, if necessary, but not the luxury lifestyle she's become accustomed to, and I want it to have conditions. We spent the next hour outlining a new financial arrangement. The bulk of Rachel's college fund would be redirected into my retirement account and business expansion fund, with a smaller portion set aside in a restricted account that Rachel could access only for verified educational expenses, not apartments, clothing, or social activities. After finishing with Daniel, I composed a detailed email to Rachel explaining my decision. I was careful to remain factual rather than emotional, outlining the new financial arrangement and my reasons for the change. Your comments at Thanksgiving made it clear that you no longer value our relationship or the sacrifices I've made for your education, I wrote. While I will always be your sister and care about your welfare, I cannot continue to fund a lifestyle that comes with the expectation that I remain invisible within it. The remaining funds will be available for tuition payments made directly to your university, but not for personal expenses. I hope this change gives you an opportunity to reflect on your values and priorities. I read the email 3 times before sending it, each time questioning whether I was making the right choice. But the memory of Rachel's dismissive words, "She's just an AC tech who never went to college," steeled my resolve. I clicked send. Rachel's response was immediate and exactly what I expected. First came the angry texts. "Are you serious right now? You can't just cut me off without warning. This is so unfair. I said one thing. You're ruining my entire future over a stupid comment." When I didn't respond, she switched to phone calls, which I let go to voicemail. Her messages evolved from outrage to bargaining. "Madison, please call me back. I'm sure we can work this out. I didn't mean what I said. I was just trying to fit in with my friends. Please, please reconsider. I don't know how I'll pay next semester's tuition." By evening, she had escalated to emotional manipulation. "After everything we've been through, how could you abandon me like this? Mum and Dad would be so disappointed in you right now." That last message nearly broke my resolve, but I reminded myself that our parents had valued honesty, hard work, and treating others with respect. Values Rachel had clearly set aside. I finally texted back a simple response. "My decision stands. When you're ready to sincerely apologise and show that your behaviour has changed, we can discuss a path forward." She called immediately, but I didn't answer. Instead, I turned off my phone and took a long walk through my neighbourhood, breathing in the cold November air and reminding myself that sometimes love means setting boundaries, even when it hurts. That night, I slept better than I had in years, unburdened by the constant worry of whether I was doing enough for Rachel. I had given her every advantage possible, often at my own expense. Now it was time for her to learn the value of what she'd taken for granted. News of my decision spread through our extended family like wildfire. By Wednesday, my phone was buzzing constantly with opinions from relatives who hadn't bothered to check on us in years. Aunt Susan, my mother's sister who had offered to take us in after the accident, but rarely visited afterward, called first. "Madison, what on earth are you thinking?" she demanded without preamble. "Rachel called me in tears. She's just a young girl trying to find her way." "She's 22, Aunt Susan," I replied calmly. "Old enough to understand that actions have consequences. But cutting off her education? Your parents would be horrified." "I'm not cutting off her education," I explained for what felt like the 100th time. "I've set aside funds for tuition payments directly to the university. What I'm no longer financing is her luxury apartment, designer wardrobe, and social life." "Well, I think you're being unnecessarily harsh. She made one mistake." I didn't bother explaining that Thanksgiving was merely the culmination of years of increasingly disrespectful behaviour. Aunt Susan had already decided I was the villain in this story. Uncle Robert, my father's brother and a tradesman himself, had a different perspective when he called that evening. "Don't tell your aunt I said this," he began in a conspiratorial tone, "but I think you did the right thing. That girl needed a reality check before she got any further removed from her raising." Several cousins took sides on social media, some posting vague supportive messages about knowing your worth, presumably for my benefit, while others shared pointed quotes about forgiveness and family loyalty, clearly aimed at me. Through it all, I maintained my position. Rachel needed to learn that relationships require mutual respect, and financial support comes with at least the basic expectation of gratitude. Meanwhile, Rachel was experiencing the consequences of her new financial reality. Through a mutual cousin, I learned that her roommates had been unexpectedly supportive until they realised Rachel couldn't contribute equally to the rent and utilities anymore. Within 2 weeks, they were suggesting she find more suitable living arrangements. The luxury apartment was suddenly too expensive, the weekend trips with friends impossible, the shopping sprees a thing of the past. According to our cousin, Rachel had been forced to take a part-time job at the campus coffee shop to cover her basic expenses, probably her first experience with actual work. Part of me ached knowing she was struggling, but another part recognised this as a necessary life lesson. Rachel had built her new identity on shifting sand, and now she was learning the hard way that authentic relationships aren't based on what you can provide materially. As the holiday season approached, I found myself experiencing an unexpected mix of emotions. There was loneliness, certainly. This would be my first Christmas without Rachel, but also a growing sense of self-respect. For years, I'd measured my worth by what I could provide for my sister. Now I was beginning to recognise my own value outside of that role. I threw myself into work, finalising plans for a business expansion that had been on hold while I prioritised Rachel's education. I accepted dinner invitations from friends I'd been too busy to see regularly. I even started taking night classes in business management at the local community college, something I'd always wanted to do, but never found time for while juggling Rachel's needs and the company. Christmas came and went without direct contact from Rachel, though I sent her a card with a modest gift certificate. What surprised me was finding a small envelope in my mailbox 2 days after Christmas, a simple card with Rachel's handwriting. "Madison, Merry Christmas. I hope you're well. Rachel." 15 words. No apology, no excuses, but also no demands or accusations. It wasn't much, but it was something, a small acknowledgement of my existence outside of my financial support. I placed the card on my mantel and allowed myself to hope that perhaps, with time and distance, Rachel might be gaining perspective. January brought news through the family grapevine that Rachel had moved to a small apartment shared with 3 other students, far from the luxury building she'd deemed essential for networking. She was still working at the coffee shop and had apparently withdrawn from some of her extracurricular activities to accommodate her work schedule. These changes weren't punishment in my eyes, but valuable experiences that would serve her better in the long run than another semester of pretending to be someone she wasn't. Real success, the kind our parents had valued, came from character and hard work, not appearances and connections. By February, the drama had largely subsided within the family. Those who had initially been outraged by my decision had moved on to other concerns, and I had settled into a new routine that prioritised my business, my education, and my own well-being for the first time in over a decade. What I didn't expect was how this shift would affect my perspective on the past. Without the constant pressure of being Rachel's financial and emotional safety net, I could finally acknowledge the resentment I'd been carrying, not just about Thanksgiving, but about years of putting my dreams on hold. I couldn't change those choices, but I could ensure that my future decisions honoured my own needs alongside others. 3 months after the Thanksgiving incident, I was reviewing inventory orders in my office when my receptionist buzzed through. "Madison, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." Before I could ask who it was, my office door opened slowly, and Rachel stepped in. I barely recognised her at first, gone with the designer clothes and professionally styled hair. Instead, she wore simple jeans, a sweater, and minimal makeup. She looked younger somehow, more like the sister I remembered. "Hi," she said softly, hovering awkwardly by the door. "Do you have a minute?" I nodded, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. A strange tension filled the room. This was the longest we'd been physically apart since our parents died. "Your office looks different," she commented, glancing around, "more organised." "I took a business management class, learned some new systems," I replied, unsure where this conversation was heading. Rachel nodded, then took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology. A real one, not the kind I tried to give when I was just scared about money." She met my eyes directly for the first time. "What I said at Thanksgiving was cruel and ungrateful, and it wasn't just that night. I've been dismissive and embarrassed about our background for a long time, and you didn't deserve that. Not after everything you've done for me." I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "These last few months have been educational," she continued with a slight smile. "Turns out apartments don't pay for themselves, and food costs money and laundry. Doesn't magically get done." She shook her head. "I never had to think about any of that because you handled it all." "It wasn't your fault," I said finally. "You were 12 when we lost Mom and Dad. I wanted to protect you from worrying about those things." "Maybe so. But I should have recognised and appreciated what you were doing instead of taking it for granted." She looked down at her hands. "My roommates all disappeared the minute I couldn't keep up with their lifestyle. Turns out those amazing connections were pretty conditional. A part of me wanted to say, 'I told you so,' but I resisted. This wasn't about being right. It was about Rachel finally seeing reality." "I withdrew from the sorority," she continued. "Couldn't afford the dues anyway. And it's been, actually, kind of a relief. I was exhausted trying to keep up appearances all the time." I nodded, understanding completely. "Who are you without all that?" "I'm figuring that out," she admitted. "But I know I'm your sister. I know I want to make Mom and Dad proud, and I know I want to finish school and actually earn the opportunities I get instead of just being adjacent to wealth and pretending it's mine." We talked for nearly 2 hours, more honestly than we had in years. Rachel shared how she'd gradually become caught up in a world where appearance mattered more than substance, where family background was currency, and where she felt constant pressure to hide her actual history. "I kept thinking if they knew the real me, they wouldn't accept me," she explained, "so I became someone else instead." "And was it worth it?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "I lost myself, and I almost lost you. We didn't resolve everything that day. Years of patterns couldn't be undone in a single conversation, but we established new boundaries and expectations. I agreed to provide limited financial support, enough for reasonable tuition and basic living expenses, but not the lifestyle she'd become accustomed to. In exchange, Rachel would work part-time in my company office during breaks, learning the business from the ground up. "I don't expect you to become an HVAC technician," I clarified, "but understanding how a successful business operates will serve you well no matter what career you choose." Rachel agreed readily. "I think I'd like to learn. Dad would have wanted me to understand what he built." Over the following months, our relationship slowly rebuilt on more equal footing. Rachel finished the semester with excellent grades despite her part-time job. During spring break, she worked in my office, displaying an unexpected aptitude for operations management. She even asked thoughtful questions about the business expansion I was planning. The most meaningful moment came unexpectedly one weekend when Rachel was home. The furnace in my house made an unusual noise, and without prompting, she asked if she could watch while I diagnosed the problem. "Dad tried to teach me some basics when I was little," she explained, "but I was never interested. I'd like to learn, at least enough to understand what you do every day." As we worked together on that simple repair, I realised we were finding a new way to be sisters, not as provider and dependent, but as two adults with different strengths and mutual respect. Later that evening, looking through old family photos, Rachel paused at one of our parents. "Do you think they'd be proud of us, of who we've become?" she asked quietly. "I think they'd be proud of who we're becoming," I answered honestly. "Growth. isn't linear. Sometimes we need to lose our way a bit to really understand the path forward. Rachel nodded, leaning her head against my shoulder like she used to when she was small. I'm sorry it took something so dramatic for me to see clearly. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones most worth establishing, I told her. I needed to respect myself enough to not accept being treated as less than I am, and you needed to recognize your own strength apart from the image you were trying to project. As Rachel prepared to return to school the next day, she hugged me tightly. Thank you for not giving up on me even when I deserved it. That's what family is, I replied. Not about status or appearances, but about loving each other through the hardest parts of becoming who we're meant to be. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision about setting boundaries with family? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most necessary growth. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family relationships, personal growth, and finding your authentic path. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that self-respect is the foundation of all healthy relationships.